We all have that dream of finding the perfect house, right? That one place that's supposed to be our safe space, our sanctuary. But what happens when that dream home becomes the very source of your worst fears? Today, we're diving into the absolutely harrowing true story of the Shea family and the historic home in Arkansas that turned their lives into a living nightmare. So let's just start with this quote from Jamie Shea because, wow, it cuts right to the absolute heart of the terror her family went through. This wasn't just, some strange noises in the night. This was a mother literally fearing that she was losing her own child to something she couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even understand. All right, let's set the scene. The year is 2003. We've got Jamie and Ben Shea and their 3 young kids. They're looking for a bigger place, room to grow. And they find what seems absolutely perfect, this historic colonial house in the small town of Lamar, Arkansas. It's got history, it's got charm, and the price, way too good to be true. And this is where you see the first major red flag. Look at this contrast. On one side, you've got the absolute dream, right? An old colonial, big yard, tons of character, 4 fireplaces. Come on. But then, during that initial walkthrough, they find this in an upstairs bedroom. A fireplace all boarded up, a spray-painted pentagram, old candle wax everywhere, basically all the signs of some kind of ritual. Now, they kind of laughed it off thinking, teenagers just messing around. But it was the very first sign that this house was hiding some really dark secrets.
So the Sheas move in, and almost right away, the house's reputation starts to find them. They begin getting these really strange, unsolicited warnings from complete strangers, people who seem to know something about their new home that they didn't.
So the first warning comes during, of all things, a garage sale. This woman just walks up, puts her hand right on the porch railing, and tells Jamie, completely matter of fact, "There are a lot of spirits in this house. I can feel it." Now, Jamie was definitely freaked out, but she tried to rationalize it. There was an old Confederate cemetery just 100 yards or so behind the property, so it was unsettling, yeah, but maybe explainable, or so she hoped. But the next warning, this one was a whole lot harder to just brush aside, because it came from someone with a direct, personal connection to the house, and it happened in probably the most normal, everyday place you could possibly imagine. Can you imagine this? You're just walking into Walmart and the greeter stops you, not to say hello, but to tell you she actually grew up in your house, and oh, by the way, it's haunted. No beating around the bush, just a blunt statement of fact from someone who would know. This was the moment that vague, creepy feeling started to turn into something much, much more real for Jamie. And here's why that warning landed like a ton of bricks. The woman didn't just stop there. She shared the house's local legend, a story about a young boy who died tragically back in the 1800s by falling from an upstairs window. The window in the exact room where Jamie's 5-year-old son, Bridger, was now sleeping. All of a sudden, that weird boarded-up fireplace and the pentagram in that room started to feel a lot more sinister. Okay, so let's track how this all builds, because it didn't take long for these stories and warnings to become first-hand experiences. The activity, it started out small, kind of subtle, but it just kept growing, both in how often it happened and how intense it got. It was like something was methodically chipping away at the family's peace of mind. First, it was just sounds. Ben, who was a nurse working the night shift, would come home and hear their baby crying on the monitor, only to realize the baby wasn't even in the house. Then, their 5-year-old, Bridger, starts complaining about hearing, and I quote, "a bunch of people talking all over each other in his room at night." Soon it became physical, loud pounding on the walls, footsteps on the stairs when no one was there, even the very distinct sound of a rubber ball bouncing down the steps. And then, finally, objects started doing things on their own. Toys in Bridger's room would just turn on, and light bulbs and batteries would drain impossibly fast. And the crucial thing to understand here isn't just the spooky stuff, it's the human cost. Think about it. Your home is supposed to be your one safe place, right? The place you can finally let your guard down and recharge. But what happens when that sanctuary becomes the source of all your stress? It creates this deep psychological crisis, the constant fear, the total lack of sleep. It doesn't just make you tired. It wears you down, it makes you irritable, and it puts your entire family on this constant, high-alert, fight-or-flight mode. And this is where the story takes a truly terrifying turn. The disturbances went from being just unsettling and stressful to deeply personal and genuinely dangerous. There were 2 specific events that would push the Shea family to their absolute breaking point.
So one night, their son Bridger comes downstairs, but he's not really there. He's in this trance. He gets right up in Jamie's face and just lets out this horrible, unnatural laugh. She's trying to snap him out of it, but she can't. While this is happening, their dog just bolts upstairs and starts barking like crazy at an empty corner of Bridger's bed. And then, when they finally go back downstairs, the dog's leash, which had been hanging securely on a hook, is just lying there right in the middle of the stairs. For Jamie, that was it. That was the moment she truly believed her son was possessed.
So the terror wasn't just in their heads anymore, which really brings us to this question. How does a haunting become physically dangerous? Well, in the days leading up to this horrible accident, the activity in the house was at an all-time high. They were seeing shadowy figures, smelling phantom pipe smoke. Jamie was driving her kids home, just running on empty, her nerves completely shot from weeks of nonstop fear and no sleep. She saw a construction barrel that seemed out of place. She swerved to avoid it, overcorrected, and flipped the family van. Her daughter, Tori, was thrown from the vehicle and pinned underneath, and by some miracle, she survived. Now, what's so important here is Jamie's perspective. She doesn't think a ghost pushed her car. She believes the conditions created by the haunting, the intense chronic stress, the extreme sleep deprivation, that's what impaired her judgment. It's a terrifying look at how psychological torment can have devastating real-world consequences. After the crash, the Sheas were just done. They were desperate. They reached out to a group called the Central Arkansas Society for Paranormal Research, or CASPR, hoping, praying that these investigators could give them some answers and maybe help them take their home back.
And the investigation? It turned up some absolutely bone-chilling results. The psychics on the team immediately sensed what they called a sea of people in Bridger's room, which confirmed exactly what he'd been saying about hearing a crowd of voices. Using a spirit board, they made contact with something that called itself Seth. But when they asked it when it was alive, the board spelled out one single terrifying word: never. And to top it all off, they actually captured a photo of a tall, shadowy figure. The Casper team basically confirmed the family's worst fears. They told the Sheas that their home was one of the most active and crowded locations they had ever investigated. They sensed at least a dozen different spirits, some harmless, some not so harmless.
But here's the thing. The investigation didn't help at all. In fact, after that spirit board session, Jamie said the whole feeling in the house changed. It grew ice cold, oppressive. It didn't just feel haunted anymore. It felt, and these are her words, just evil.
And this was the final straw. The family was in the kitchen one night, playing a burnt CD, when it suddenly just jumps to a track that doesn't exist, track 99. And out of the speakers comes this desperate voice repeating the same phrase over and over and over. That was it. That night they grabbed what they could carry and they fled the house for good. You know, looking back, Jamie really reflected on what they truly lost. It wasn't just about the house. It was about losing that fundamental human need for a sanctuary. Her story is just such a powerful reminder that when we lose that feeling of safety in our own home, that stress doesn't just stay at the front door. It gets inside you, it follows you everywhere, and it can take a truly devastating toll on your health, both physical and mental. And so, that leaves us with this final question. I mean, think about it. The Sheas put up with unexplained noises, terrifying visions, even a near-fatal accident. But it was a phantom voice on a CD that finally drove them out. It really makes you wonder, what would be your breaking point? What would it take for you to walk away from your home and never ever look back?